Association, the National Rifle Association, the Mississippi Bar Association, the American Bar Association, Ole Miss Hall of Fame, and Sigma Nu Fraternity. Says he's a strong supporter of the American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, and the DREAM program. Says Senator Watson was born on December 2nd, 1977 in Pascagoula. He's married to the former Lauren Emsweiler, and they have two daughters, Gracie, Pierce, and Annie. He's a member of the First Presbyterian Church in Pascagoula. Currently, it has on here that Michael, whether it changes or not, is the chairman on the Environmental Protection, Conservative and Water. He's a chair for that organization, and is the vice chair on the drug policy. Part of the Finance, Forestry, Investigative State Offices, Judiciary B, Ports and Marine Resources, Wildlife and Fisheries, and Parks. Other than that, we remember Michael from the first campaign with Chris McDaniel. I was wishing he was going to be part of the second the campaign, but it didn't come about. I hope that he is still a true conservative and fighter in the state Senate, and will be as a Secretary of State. And let me add one more thing before I introduce Michael up here. I'm very disappointed in our Secretary of State currently. I don't know why he wants to be a representative as a lieutenant governor. We had several elections that we had a lot of questions about and called his office, and basically he poo-pooed us. In fact, I went to his office. And I'm very disappointed that he didn't help Melanie Sojourner, because I did go up there to the Capitol and actually went through the meetings. I'm disappointed in the first election with Chris, because I felt like he won the election fair and square, but there were some things that happened that I didn't like. But nothing was ever done. So to me, if you run for office and you don't fix the things that are broken, why do you want to keep representing the people? I feel strongly that Michael will, but let me call Michael up here and he can speak for himself. Michael Watson, Senator Michael Watson. You don't have to. You can speak into it if you want to.
Is that loud enough? Well, good evening. It's good to be with you. Obviously, lots of familiar faces in the crowd, be it through campaigns or through issues at the Capitol. We've worked on a lot of things together, so I appreciate your hard work, your dedication, and your commitment to making Mississippi a better place. Lucky for you, I left my notebook at home, so don't have all my notes. What was that?
You got 3 kids.
I do have 3 children. Who said that?
The bio we read.
All bio. 3 children now. So I have a 7-month-old now at home, and she is she's a blast. So Cora is our latest addition. I left for session last Monday, and Lauren called, and she said, I had to take the baby to the doctor this afternoon. I said, well, what's wrong? She said, well, she has an ear infection. So session started off nicely with a baby with an ear infection, daddy leaving, and then 2 others to get to school. By the way, Don, our oldest, now homeschools, so we are following in your footsteps with that. And it's been a really interesting transition from traditional public schools to a homeschooling child. One of our other children is in public school, so I see both sides of the picture right now. And it's been fun as a parent to make those choices. And if you followed anything in my legislative past, you know that I'm a huge supporter of parental choice in education. I think parents should have the decision of where their child attends school, be it a private school, public school, charter school, homeschool, you name it. But I think there's no better issue for conservatives than having parents choose where their children attend school. So that's been a big one for me, and I'm living proof of it right now. So we have 2 in different types of school, and that's a good thing. Secretary of State's office. A lot of folks have said, Michael, why did you choose that? Who knows what all the Secretary of State's office touches? It's incredible. A huge list of things that impacts your lives every day. And so as I looked across the landscape and thought, where could you make a big difference? And over my last 11.5 years in the state Senate, it's been one of my goals. Michael, try your best to make the most good. Do the most good you can for the people of Mississippi from a conservative mindset. And where are the places that you have those opportunities? So when the Secretary of State's office was opening up, and when you look at all the things that it touches, all the aspects of your life, I thought, where better for a good conservative to put his stamp in and try to run for that elected office. So that's what we're doing. I qualified last Friday. So it's official. I am a candidate for Secretary of State here in Mississippi, and excited about that. Some of the bigger things that it touches that you know of, really, elections obviously is the face of the office. Had a lot of experience with election law from a challenge that we filed back in 2014. So I got to see a lot of the election law in the works, and how it works and how it needs to be tweaked. So we filed legislation, gosh, for the last 3 or 4 years to clean up and correct some of that. And some of the changes were made, not all of them were made, so we're still working on that. But elections is the face of the Secretary of State's office, so that's going to be a big one. And one of the things that we've got to do here is to secure the vote. People say, Michael, what does that mean? Well, when you look at the office now, and voter ID has been a huge success in Mississippi. It's been a good thing. So I appreciate the legislature passing that. One of the few Secretary of State's offices in the country that was able to implement voter ID without being sued by the federal government. So the office has done a good job with that piece. But did you know, well, first let me ask this question. How many pieces of ID can you show when you go vote? Does anybody know what the number is?
About 8 or something like that.
9 total. And of those 9, 7 of the 9 can be attained by a non-citizen. So we still got some work to do there. We want to make sure that only United States citizens are voting in our elections. So that's a big piece. If you look at what some states have done, Kansas probably was the most rigid. It was struck down by the federal court, so we're researching that now. But basically what they said was, look, you got to provide proof of citizenship when you register to vote. If you see it now, the DMV, motor voter, lots of different ways to register to vote. So there are some holes out there that we're going to try to repair and try to fix and try to close to make sure only citizens are elected or can vote in our elections here in Mississippi. Other states like Tennessee have done things where once you file registration to vote, you run through a database, and if it flags that there possibly this person may not be a citizen, then you can further dig into their citizenship requirements to make sure they show proof that they are a citizen and can vote in our elections. So there's different ways to go about that, but that's an important one that we're definitely going to focus on and make sure that happens. Public lands is another big place where the Secretary of State's office has an influence in our state. From tidelands down on the coast to 16th section lands to forfeited properties, huge impact across the state. 16th section land touches just about every school district, obviously, in the state, every county in the state, so that's a big piece of what the office does. If you look at business services, every business in the state has to register with the Secretary of State's office. Corporations, LLCs, you name it, nonprofits. You talk about an impact on the state. This office touches a lot of things. So we're better to have a conservative mindset to understand, look, limited government is best. How do we roll these regulations back? How do we shrink these boards? How do we do more with less? And I think that's an important piece of the office. So one of the things I'm most excited about with the Secretary of State's office is, you'll remember a few years ago, Melanie Armstrong. Are y'all familiar with her story in Tupelo? Several of you are. Well, Melanie decided she wanted to open up a place where she could braid hair. And so she did that in Tupelo. And the good old Board of Cosmetology got involved and said, you know what? You can't do that without a license. You're going to have to go to school for 300 hours to learn how to braid people's hair. Well, Melanie already knew how to braid hair, so she didn't need that, but she, look, okay, fine, we'll participate, we'll go get our license, and the license is for wigology, which I don't even know what that means. I don't know if she knows what that means, but she had to get a license for wigology to braid hair. She did it. Melanie's business took off, was doing really, really good. She thought, you know what, as an entrepreneurial spirit in Mississippi would think, if I had more people working, we could make more money and do even more things that we want to do with our life. So Melanie decided, I'm going to hire some people and we're going to expand our services. Not so fast. The Board of Cosmetology comes back and says, hey, now if you want to teach people to braid hair, you're going to have 1,200 hours of class. Come on, man, that's ridiculous. Thank God Melanie had a backbone. She said, no, this isn't right. I'm going to challenge this. She challenged it and won. Well, out of that came some legislation. And one of the pieces of legislation, or one of the things that the legislation did, was created this Occupational Licensing Review Commission. So anytime these new boards or new commissions try to make new rules, and it's protectionist measures, what it is, how do we protect our turf so we can't get more people coming in here to compete with us, anytime that happens, this new commission can strike those down. So that's a really important part, in my opinion, of what the Secretary of State's office is going to be doing in the future. Protecting us, the free market. there's so many entrepreneurial spirits in Mississippi that we just want to, look, I just want to make a job for my neighbors, or make a dollar for my family, the good things that they can do. So that's an important piece of what the office is going to do. Again, you talk about what all the Secretary of State's office touches: sports agents, securities. I can go on and on and on. But the idea is, listen, it's an office that touches a lot of things. So we want to make sure we have a conservative in that office that can help with the elections, that can help with business law, that can help with these regulatory reforms, to cut regulations, to cut these crazy rules that these boards and commissions put on us, for their entrepreneurial spirit to rise up. Elections. One of the things that I've done from day one is to visit schools. I think it's important that our young people understand why they need to be engaged, that to hold people accountable, to listen not only to what they say, but watch what they do. And then when they do those things, we hold them accountable, kick them in the shin when you see them in Walmart. Hey, that was a dumb vote. Hey, that was a bad thing that you did. So that's another thing I'm excited about, is getting into our schools and understanding the importance of elections to our young people and paying attention to what's going on in government. So again, lots of things. I could go on and on. I don't want to waste all the time. I know you may have some questions, and I know Randall's here to talk as well. And thank goodness I left my notes at home, so I can cut that short. So happy to open up. Feel free, whatever questions you might have. Legislative, Secretary of State's office. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm going to have a hard time with elections for a lot of reasons, and that is the state has delegated to private entities the voice of the people. The Republican Party will essentially assert the ability for people to participate in elections if they decide that they don't want to stick to what the law says in terms of who can run in the front, who can vote in our primaries. Is there any interest in your mind to get our primaries either completely open, or to make sure that we have people who are truly Republicans who will vote in Republican primaries, and not allow Democrats to cross over in runoff elections as happened in 2014? Because my vote was essentially canceled out in that runoff election, as I'm sure over 8,000 other people were.
Yeah, I'll speak specifically to that one. Really, with legislation that I've filed for the last 3 or 4 years now, there's a portion in the election law that deals specifically with runoffs and the history of people voting, and which primaries they're voting in, keeping records of that to make sure that this crossover that we saw doesn't happen again. Obviously, that is the law now, but it's circumvented.
The Republican Party did nothing to uphold the law, and there was no afterward remediation about that. And that is a private entity, and that cancels out my public vote. Is there nothing sacred to those private entities, such as the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, that they are required to stick to the law? That, as it's, the way the law is also written, and Delbert was asked to fix this, is an enforcement of those entities, and he said, I don't want to have that responsibility. As a Secretary of State and as an attorney, it seems to me that you would have that responsibility by your very licensure.
Well, again, what I can control is what Michael Watson does, not what somebody else does. So what I have done is filed legislation to correct what I saw were loopholes with that, to try to make that better going forward. Obviously, that legislation hasn't passed yet, but we've reintroduced it this year and going to make a few more tweaks to that. So my opinion is, again, and as you saw, a challenge was filed about several individuals that found information and support for that challenge. The challenge was not heard, unfortunately. I do think some different things would have maybe happened out of that, but what I saw again was where there are loopholes, let me draw some legislation up where I feel like it would close those loopholes to get that done. So, if
the Secretary of State is not responsible for making sure that happens, whose responsibility would it be?
Well, again, it's the chief election officer of the state. It's the Secretary of State's job to follow the law. Now, again, what you saw was a challenge. That's not under the Secretary of State's domain there. The courts actually didn't hear that. So he doesn't control the courts. That was one of the things that they dropped. In my opinion, I thought they should have heard it, but. You know,
what about the Attorney General?
Again, the case was filed in the courts. The courts did not hear it. So I don't know how to answer your question other than that.
So you think that the Attorney General would have no impetus or requirement to follow up such challenges?
again, a challenge was filed in a court of law by an individual party, and the courts did not hear that. Now, if the Attorney General wants to review it and do something with it, then that's going to be for the Attorney General to decide, not Michael Watson. That's not my role, so.
I understand that, but going forward, we have to go forward now.
Sure.
If we don't have that kind of introduction going forward, what assurance do we have that our votes are going to be helped secure? I mean, Delbert Hosemann was the Secretary of State who decided not to do anything about it. Now he's running for Lieutenant Governor. If he becomes head of the Senate, is he going to allow such legislation to come to the Senate?
Well, I think that's going to be a question you have to ask him. What I saw was some loopholes in law. Drew some legislation to change that. Was involved, obviously, in an election law challenge. As Secretary of State, my goal and what I will do is to follow the law. And if I feel like the law is not being followed, then it's my job to call out what I see that I don't think is legal. And if I need to get engaged in some kind of legal challenge, then so be it. But all I control is what Michael controls, not anybody else. So.
Well, I'm talking about you in terms of what's going forward. And
Sure.
what you're looking forward to that, to ascending to that office. So therefore, what kind of proposals can you make to make that more ironclad?
Well, yeah.
Because that private entity, the Republican Party, has essentially denied many people.
So there's
a voice.
legislation now, filed again this year. I actually have it, I think it's in my office. I'm going to read it one more time before I drop the bill. And what it talks about is a history of people voting in primary elections. Again, it tightens down some of the loopholes that I saw when I reviewed that election law back in, well, every year, but back in 14 specifically, to see what happened, how something could fall through the cracks. And as Secretary of State, it would be my job to encourage the legislature to pass legislation that I see fit for elections. I think Secretary Hosemann, my hope is, if he's elected to Lieutenant Governor, that he will give audience to the Secretary of State and let me present my plan. Hey, this is why I think we should do this. Again, whether or not he agrees with me, that's a decision he has to make. But if I need to spend time with legislators and getting them to promote that legislation, then so be it. But again, I'm going to do my best.
There's a new book out. It's called The Law of Article 5, which is speaks to how the colonies and the states began the start of our federal government at the very beginning, and it talks about how those collaborative people actually formed a government. And we are having trouble getting the attention of this state government to file that resolution. And we all know that Congress is out of control. It's totally out of control. They're more interested in their turf fight than they are in doing the will and the work of the people.
Sure.
What really bothers me is that I don't see anyone actually working to push our legislators in Congress to talk for the states. But I do see a lot of collaboration and support from our state legislature for those 6 people who are in Congress, instead of giving them the impetus that they need to start addressing what our needs are.
Well, I can speak to what I do. I contact our federal delegation when I see issues that are coming up, and I'll say, hey, listen, as a conservative, this is how I see this, and I would encourage you to vote that way. Now, do they listen all the time? You know, maybe not. But as to the resolution you're talking about, I think there are 30-something co-authors this year. Should have passed last year. In my opinion, there were some maybe backdoor dealings when it fell in the Rules Committee in the Senate. I don't know that for a fact, but as I understand it, the group was told that the resolution would come out, and then on the back end of it, it did not come out. And there's some confusion as to why it didn't happen. So. Well,
there's also some confusion in telling people who were trying to get this passed, the group in the grassroots group, that the Rules Committee's meetings are not open door. That's a real travesty.
They just had one recently, and I think the press was there, so I don't know.
No, but when they were talking about the resolution in 2018, and they were supposed to have a Rules Committee vote on it, the people who belonged in that Rules Committee did not let the people know that they had the right to come in and listen to that that meeting, that rules
I
committee
was not
meeting.
aware of that.
That needs to be a very important piece of information that everybody who is a citizen and votes should know about.
Sure. Committees that are called, they're supposed to be publicized when they have a meeting. Every committee in the legislature, unless there's something specific where they can convene into some kind of executive session, but yeah, I didn't know about that. That's the first I've heard of it.
Mhm.
Got a question back here.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Michael. I have a concern with the voter rolls. Last year, we tried to get signatures for Senator McDaniel to be on the ballot, and then we tried to get signatures for the state flag to be an initiative. We collected, and I'll use a round number, like 400. We only got about 200
Certified.
approved and certified. What can be done to clean up all voter rolls in the state, because it is a problem?
Well, several states have done different things. I know Ohio was pretty aggressive with theirs, and it was upheld at the Supreme Court. If you miss a certain number of elections, a mail card was sent out. If they were responded to, then they could remove you. A couple of different things that other states are doing, but I was sat down with an election commissioner probably maybe a month or so ago, and he said, Michael, I can go through every county right now and show you dead people on their rolls. Every single county. And so I had, luckily, the opportunity to sit down with several election commissioners and say, listen, how do we address this? So they're all working on different proposals of how do we present that. And that's one of the cool things that I've seen. These responses to these issues and the fixes are with the people if you'll just sit down and listen to them. So the folks that are doing it, I'm not an election commissioner. I don't know what they see every day. So it's been important for me to sit down with them and say, listen, these are the issues that I'm seeing. You tell me what you're seeing. And you see this every single day. So what are the fixes that we need to do to make that correct? So they're working on proposals now, actually, to do that.
Driver's licenses are being used to enlist people to vote, right?
Motor voter, when they get registered to vote, you can check.
Okay, our driver's license have to be renewed every 4 or 8 years. If the voter rolls are pulled in on the license, why not at that time make everybody renew their voter and their driver's license at the same time?
Yeah, that's certainly an idea I've not thought of. And one other thing that if you look at our statutes now, if you come to register to vote in Mississippi, you do not have to have an ID. So if I walk
I
in,
did.
you don't. That's the
I
law.
did whatever I had to.
I'm just telling you what the law says. If you walk in and I've got my utility bill or something to prove this is where I live or whatever, you can register to vote. Don't have to have an ID. Don't have to have anything other than proof of
You have
residency.
your birth certificate like I had to have. That.
Don't have to. Not under Mississippi law. That's one of the things we want to look at. Yes, sir.
Doesn't the first line on that application ask if you're a citizen?
It does. Swear or affirm. But,
Let me ask you a question.
sure.
What interaction would you have as the secretary with the circuit clerks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, obviously, they play a big role in elections, and it's been important. I've met with probably 10 of them already, and sat down and said, look, these are some of the ideas that I have. And again, it's a listening thing to me. I want to hear what you have to say as well. So I've got great relationships with several of those already. It's an open line of communication is the most important thing to me. What are you seeing on the ground that we need to fix at the state level? Obviously, government at the local level is the best, closest to the people. And so my plan is to have an open door. And when there are issues that rise up, and I can talk to these circuit clerks that I've built relationships with, because that's what's important. Once they trust you and understand you're a man of your word, and you're going to do what you say you're going to do, those lines of communication open up even better. So it's important for me to get and to meet as many of them as I can. But I've had great interaction with them so far, and some, quite honestly, have been tough to build bridges with. As you will recall, a lot of them were upset about 2014, and to be quite honest with you, several have said, listen, I don't even know if I want to meet with you or not. And that's okay, that's part of it. My goal again is to say, well, I want to sit down and talk to you. And I want to, if we need to bury hatchets, let's bury hatchets, but we need to move forward. This is who I am, this is what I believe in. And if that lines up with who you are and what you believe in, then we're going to be fine. But hopefully, once I'm elected, open door. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. Let's have an adult conversation about it. I'm not going to be mad at you, and hopefully you won't be mad at me. But let's build those bridges where we need to build bridges.
The reason I asked that question was during the time that we were getting Initiative 62 signatures, I would take them to the circuit clerk's office, and I would say 40% of them were kicked out. I found out later, after she kicked them out because the address was not right, or just if they didn't put John
Across the
Henry
T.
the third. Anyway, I found out later talking with an attorney up at Delbert office, she should not have kicked them out as long as they were in Hines County. So, I mean, it was more than a third, probably like 40% of them that were kicked out. Just not, you know, not being on the same page with everybody.
Sure. And I think that's part of it too. One of the things I found, no matter what you're dealing with, is the education component. Be it, how do we get a petition, or how do we do this, how do we do that? And having an open door when folks have questions, look, we want to do this thing right, would you give us some direction? Well, you're not the only person that needs to know that. Also, the circuit clerks and whoever else is going to be dealing with that petition, let's make sure we're on the same page. As long as we're on the same page and we're operating under the same rules, then I think it will run smoother. So that's obviously a goal as well. I appreciate your question. Yes, sir.
While ago it was mentioned about the citizenship being on the application there.
Sure.
Why is it that when an application is filled out, that it's just, the information is just accepted and not checked?
Yeah, and that's what I was telling you earlier. I know Tennessee does this and several other states, but once that application comes in, it's then cross-checked with several other databases. And if a flag pops up and says this might not be a citizen, then they can call the person back in and go further in with their information. So I think it's very important that we do that. I think Tennessee has done a really good job with it.
Are you saying the state doesn't have laws to make them do it now?
Well, I think they can now. The problem is, you know, if you catch it, or who's reviewing it that catches it now. That's something we need to dig into deeper. But again, as I mentioned, Tennessee and some other states, once they run these through these other databases and the flag pops up, obviously it gives you the green light to go on in and get some more information.
Well, if it comes up, if an individual citizen realizes it's coming up, and can they come to the Secretary of State's office and have something checked on?
I'd imagine so. You mean if somebody had proof that somebody?
Yeah.
Right, sure. I would hope so. My office will, and I think that's another thing where maybe the Attorney General's office would come in. Secretary of State understands, hey, this is some illegal activity. Let's make sure the proper authorities know about it. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Got just a few. Are you qualified for this run?
Yes, sir.
And you're on the Republican ticket,
I'm a conservative.
conservative?
Yes,
You're on the conservative
I
ticket?
happen to be running as a Republican as well.
Well, the state law, that's a very astute observation. I'm glad you pointed that out, okay? Because that's, I agree with you on that. Not everybody with an R after the name is on the right.
I'm a conservative first.
But now, my understanding of the law is that you have to pay, and you probably did pay a fee.
I did.
You wrote a check.
That's right.
And would you mind telling us what that fee?
It's $500.
It's $500.
Yes, sir.
And can you remember who you wrote the check to?
To qualify for Secretary of State in a primary like that, it's Mississippi Republican Party.
Okay, you didn't write it to the Secretary of State's office.
I did not.
My understanding of the code section is that it says you are to write it to the Secretary of the Executive Committee of that Republican Party. Okay, now I'm going somewhere with this.
Sure.
In 2016, I helped a political party. It was not Republican or Democrat. It was one of the third parties. And I helped them to get a candidate on the ballot. And this person was running for a U.S. president, okay? And my reading of the code section was that check was supposed to be written to the secretary of the state executive committee of that party. Now, this party is a bona fide political party that's been operating since 1992. But there's a young woman that's an attorney over with Delbert Hoseman's office who insisted that we write the check to the Secretary of State.
Interesting. Are the code sections different for presidential as opposed to state?
Now, the only one that says that you have to write it to the Secretary of State is if the person is running as an independent.
Right.
If they're running as on a party, a political party that's established and recognized in the state.
So then was her, I guess, argument that it wasn't a recognized party, or?
She didn't tell me. I tried to explain to her, I said, now this code section says that this is supposed to go to the secretary of the political party. And she said, well, nobody else is complaining about it. I still remember that as
It's not a good enough answer, not
If you look at the Secretary of State's, because I'm dealing with that right now, it specifically says Republican Party, Democrat Party, and wants everybody else in together.
Does it?
So, well, I guess the
Now,
rationale.
on the Secretary of State's website.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm looking at the code
Yeah.
section.
Code doesn't say that.
It's the rationale then probably is the Republican Party runs the primary, Democratic Party runs the primary. There is not a primary in that, I guess, specific party. So it would roll on to the November, which would be the general, which is the state. Gotcha.
Well, I'm preparing to send a letter to Delbert Hoseman and ask him to refund the money. And since you're running for that office, I'm wondering if maybe I could call you.
I can't refund the money.
No, I'm not talking about refunding the money.
Yeah, I'm
talking
happy
about-
to look at that code section and.
You might want to speak to this. You might even want to speak to it if we have to call a press conference.
I'm happy to take a look at it. I'm happy to take a look at it.
But this woman insisted that we write this check. She told me, and I said this code, I said, my reading of this code section is this. So now we went to the trouble of getting an opinion from the AG's office. Of course, he wouldn't, we got an elected official to send this request, and they would not give him an official opinion.
And again, I wonder if, back to the primary question, if it's because the Republican Party runs the primary, the Democratic Party runs the primary. They don't have a primary, so does it?
Well,
Go
the
straight to
code
the
section says
office.
that every political party established in the state,
I got you.
they're responsible for their primaries, but you don't have to be responsible for a primary if you don't have one person.
That's right.
Primaries are just to choose between two or more people running the same job. So we would have had a primary if we had had more than one candidate.
I'm interested to hear that response.
Well, I'll be glad to email you
Sure.
a copy of the response we got from the AG's office.
Sure, it'll be fine.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't know what kind of answer we're going to get from Delbert Hoseman, but as I see this is not good politically for him. Okay? And if you might let me change gears here.
Sure.
Here's a list of some of the ones you introduced, and they all, if you can see them, I have to do this to read them. Maybe you could speak to these. I'm particularly interested in the one about the firearms registration there.
Yeah, that one came about a few years ago. Basically, there were some threats that, or some talk where the federal government would be able to send in whoever to try to confiscate guns. And so part of that measure was basically to say, state of Mississippi, law enforcement, you don't have to abide by that. So you're not going to take people's guns here in Mississippi.
And that would become codified
Correct.
in Mississippi Code?
That's right.
Now, would it say that they don't have to, or would it say that they could be called upon to resist the feds?
I had to go back and look at that. I don't remember that language off the top of my head. I'll read it though, and once you email me the other, I'll respond.
Okay.
I don't remember exact language in that. I want to say it was a stand down, but I can't recall specifically.
Speaking of that email, I do on occasion send emails to the addresses, email addresses for the senators and reps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess you all read those on a regular basis?
All of us? Yes. So, again, I guess I do. I remember this is my freshman year. I was staying late one night and just banging away on emails, and one of the older senators came by and he said, you know those people don't live in your district, right? I said, yes, sir, but I felt like if they took the time to email me, I would take the time to respond. So it's been something I've always tried to do. Do I miss one every now and then? Sure. But I definitely try to respond to every single one that comes to my email. If somebody takes the time, I'm gonna try to respond to them.
Well, I appreciate that. That wasn't pointed at you. I've sent several where I didn't get a response. I will tell you this, one of the ways the Tea Party operates is through networking. And I've run for office myself, and I cannot imagine anybody running for political office doesn't realize that if that guy doesn't live in your district, he may know somebody. He
That's
may
right.
even be kin to somebody who lives in your district. That's how networking works.
I had one, lived in, was it Eupora, somewhere around there. He had an issue with DHS or somebody. And the funny thing is, well, it's not funny, it's pretty cool. He had heard, look, if you talk to this certain guy, he's always responds and he'll help you. And so the guy emailed me, and it wasn't a huge issue, I don't recall, but I talked to DHS and got it resolved, whatever the issue was. Well, come to find out, my sister lives close to Eupora, and either ran into his aunt or cousin or somebody, and they knew that that was my sister, and said, Michael, help the guy with whatever it was. So, small town, everybody knows everybody in Mississippi. Eventually come back to you.
When you do you have to take the oath of office? I mean, each time?
To be sworn in?
Huh?
To be sworn
To be
in?
sworn in?
It's on my desk too, if you want to come see it.
Okay, so you have taken it, obviously.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a problem with it?
Oath of office?
That
Not that I know of.
you swear an allegiance to the Constitution, right?
That's correct.
Well, the reason I'm asking that question is because the
Yes,
Tea
it's-
Party has supported candidates before who are strict constitutionalists, and they come under fire as if they're some kind of animal, some kind of monstrosity that nobody's ever seen because they want to uphold the Constitution. And I'm dumbfounded by that. I can't get my mind wrapped around that. And I'm thinking every political person that wins have to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution, and I can't put my thumb on why that's like that.
You know, one of the pieces in our office, our oath of office, says that I will not trade my vote. Basically, language that says that. Yet I see all the time where people say, well, you vote for this, then,
Trade or sell their vote?
yeah. So, you didn't hear that here.
It is a thing about it.
Yeah, so,
No, but you just said you wouldn't.
that's right.
Isn't that what you said?
That's right. And I've actually talked about oath on the floor before. And that, sometimes.
Well, I mean, you want to be on record with that. With that.
I'm definitely on record with that. That's right.
But following that up-
Questions, please, just a couple more.
Following up with that, lobbyists enjoy special consideration in the legislature
By who?
by some of the legislators
Okay.
and from in higher office. And I'm very concerned about the fact that there's lavish parties that are given for the legislators. And I know for sure that happens because I used to be a registered nurse anesthetist, and I know that the parties that we would give for legislators were in excess of $5,000, $10,000. Those are things of value that the legislators enjoy. And I'm thinking that the social calendar of the legislature ought to be curtailed to less than $500, because those are things of value, and lots of enjoyment is appreciated by the legislators, and they have special favors they will do for people who give those lavish parties.
Who's that?
I'm not going to name names here. I'm
You're
not
asking
going
me
to,
questions, so.
but I'm saying, is that a consideration for legislation that you would propose?
So, as I understand Mississippi law, it's wide open, as you kind of suggested there. The deal is there are reporting statutes, and so if someone wants to go see who was spending money on who, and then trace that back to a vote, I think that's how it should operate. Because if $1, a cheeseburger, or a party, or something else can change your vote, then you don't need to be in office. And that needs to be shown. People like me, I don't care who the lobbyist is. I'm going to vote what I think is right for Mississippi and what I think is right for my district. Now, I will say this. I couldn't do my job without a lobbyist. Absolutely couldn't do it. There are so many issues that come into that Senate chamber, into that House chamber, that I've never seen in my life. Now, here's the good part. As an attorney, I know there's two sides to every story. So every time a lobbyist comes in and says, hey, here's what you need to know about this. More times than not, I'll say, who's on the other side? Because I want to go talk to them too. And once you get those two sides, usually the truth's typically somewhere around the middle. But as long as you do your homework and you understand those issues and you vote how you believe you should vote, I don't have a problem with lobbyists. Now, are there legislators that may be able to be influenced? There probably are. And again, I go back to the open reporting. That's our job as citizens, our job as electors, to go and say, hey, who's influencing my member of the Senate? Who's influencing my member of the House? If I feel like they bought their vote, then I need to get them unelected next time and elect somebody else who won't do that. So I hope that answered your question, but as long as it's reported and people can go see and there's sunlight on it, so be it.
There's
more
no
questions?
sunlight on that kind of stuff.
Just a minute.
Michael, I have a question here
Sure.
from Jerry Cope. I'm wanting to know about supporting open primaries.
So we've looked at that before a few times. Again, if you look at the legislation that I proposed, it sticks with the closed primaries we have now and would, well, in theory, and tightens that down to look at the primary, the history of primary voting. I believe that's a First Amendment deal. So a Republican primary should be for Republicans, and Democratic primary should be for Democrats. And so if you look at the history of voting in primaries, now if somebody changes parties and they switch and they register or whatever, not that you register parties, but they start voting in a Republican primary, so be it, or Democratic primaries for that matter. But I like the system we have now. I think it's a good one, as long as we can enforce it. Well, I'll stick around for a bit. I know we've got another speaker, so I'll yield the floor to Don or whoever. I appreciate your engagement. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you holding folks accountable. That's important.
Thank you.